is that a donation?
Here, be surprised at how many do not see the sign that says stop at the office first. And just for safety's sake, if you need to leave, please come and tell me, and I will open the door and let you out. Okay, about the house. It was built between 1772 and 1774 for Jacob Ford Jr., his wife Theodosia, and their family. The house is over 9,000 square feet, and it sat in the center of a 200-acre farm. This house was the showplace of the area. Don't know if you noticed as we approached the building, large Palladian window over the front door. Inside here, note the high ceilings and doorways, all meant for show, all meant to impress, but not very practical. In the winter, this would have been a cold and drafty house. In the summer, the tops of the front and rear doors could be open for cross ventilation, and by keeping the bottoms closed, you kept the farm animals out. Because back then, people did not pen their animals. They let them graze freely, and that's how the critters got fed. Now, Jacob Ford Jr. was a very wealthy man. He owned iron mines. He was into the production of hemp. He owned a grist mill, and he was also involved in the manufacture of gunpowder. So he is what we would call today financially diversified. Unfortunately for Jacob Ford Jr., he doesn't live too many more years to enjoy this fine house he had built. In the winter of 1777, he is a colonel with the local militia. He's out on maneuvers with his men when he contracts pneumonia. They bring him home here to the house to hopefully recuperate, but sadly that does not happen, and he does die here in the house. So let's fast forward once again to December 1st, 1779, because this is the day that George Washington arrives, and he does not come alone. He brings with him 3 aides de camp, 2 secretaries, and, wait for it, 18 servants. There's also a home guard of between 100 and 120 men on average. They're kind of like Washington's Secret Service. And while they will build huts across the street, in the interim, they need a place to sleep. It's December after all. And that would be here in the house, in the attic, in the hallways, probably right where we're standing. This is a very busy house. On any given night, there are between 30 and 100 people sleeping here. Now there are 4 pieces of furniture that are original to the Fords. First one you're going to see is in this first room, which is now right in front of me. The piece is the large secretary on the far wall. The room was the Ford's parlor or living room. Now it is the conference room. It's where the aides de camp and secretaries work, and it is also where they eat their meals. This is an administrative post. So a lot of what goes on here is Washington dictating orders, reports, and letters to his aides de camp. Each piece of correspondence takes weeks to months to get from point A to point B. Then you have to wait a like amount of time for a return. So you need a point of reference. You need a copy. Well, back then, there's only one way to get a copy, and that's to have someone handwrite it. That's where the 2 secretaries can. So take your pictures. Again, please remember not to lean over the gates. And when you're ready, I'll meet you at the little room back left. Okay, this little room down on my right was Jacob Ford Jr.'s study. Now it is George Washington's private office. I mentioned that he wrote a lot of letters. Many of these are to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, where he is pleading with them to send supplies to help alleviate the condition of his men in Jockey Hollow. But the Continental Congress is broke. They have no power to tax, so they must rely on voluntary contributions from the colonies. But even when supplies are sent, they don't always make it to their destination. Highway robberies are common. But this winter, the biggest issue is the snow and the ice. But this isn't even Washington's greatest concern this winter. His biggest problem is declining enlistments. As of January 1780, Washington's army numbers about 10,000 men, of which the 3-year enlistments are up for about 2,500 of them. Having told you about the conditions of the men in Jockey Hollow, it can come as no surprise that many of these men do not wish to re-up. They feel that they have given 3 years of their lives in the service of their country, and now they just want to go home. In addition, 1,000 men simply desert because they just can't take it anymore. There was one man, though. He was just a teenager when he joined the Revolutionary Army. His name was Joseph Plum Martin, and he kept a diary of his experiences throughout the Revolutionary War. And he stated, "Those of us who stayed did so because we believed that the cause was truly our own." Now I have a question for you all. Do you think that the British knew where Washington was staying?
No.
Sure they did.
Yes. Good guess, you know. In fact, in February of 1780, there was a plot to send about 300 British troops to Morristown to hopefully overwhelm Washington's much smaller home guard. If you remember, I said he had between 100 and 120 men on average. The idea was to kidnap George Washington, with the thought that that should bring about a speedy end to this rebellion. But that nasty winter out there spoiled their plan. They get across the Hudson River, which is frozen 18 feet thick with ice, so thick that they're able to walk across it. Not only that, they roll a 3-ton cannon across it, but they get as far as Hackensack, New Jersey, and conditions deteriorate so that they have to turn around and go back to New York. That means that George Washington and our revolution are safe for now. So on that note, after you look in that room, we're going to climb these stairs and we'll focus on the room at the end of the hall, the one on the right. This room was the Ford's bedroom. In it are 2 more pieces that they own. The first is the dressing table near the front door, and the other one is the mirror. This winter, this room is being occupied by George and Martha Washington. Every winter of the war, Martha Washington travels to wherever her husband is. It's a relatively safe time of year to travel, weather notwithstanding, because as I said, there's no fighting going on. Now this year, we're not exactly sure when she left their plantation home in Mount Vernon, Virginia, but we do know that she arrived in Philadelphia on the 21st of December. Couldn't get out again until the 27th because of all the snow, and finally, Washington sends a horse-drawn sleigh to get her, and she arrives here in the mansion on New Year's Eve. Washington, like any soldier, is entitled to an occasional furlough, but he doesn't take them. He doesn't feel comfortable with his men, so he only gets home about 10 days during the entire course of the war, which lasts 8 years. This occurs in 1781. As the war has moved south and the troops are marching toward Yorktown Peninsula in Virginia, Washington gets to go home for 3 days. About a week later, when Cornwallis surrenders his British army at Yorktown, Washington gets to go home again for a whole week. And that is it until the end of the war in 1783. Now across the hall is where the officers sleep. I'm using that term interchangeably with the aides de camp and secretary. By my feet is a replica of a folding camp bed, short for campaign bed. Each officer was responsible for the purchase of his own camp bed, as well as his own uniform. Now inside here, you can see what these camp beds look like unfolded. And while they don't look terribly spacious, they would have been okay for the average Revolutionary War soldier. Here's where we wanted to dispel a myth that he was a little guy, say 5 feet like me. No, they have detailed records that show he was, on average, 5'8"3/4. Today's American man, average height, 5'9". Not a lot of difference. The life for the officers was quite different from that of the enlisted men. For one thing, officers were pretty much able to come and go as they pleased. And Washington's youngest aide-de-camp took full advantage of this. And he's someone we're quite familiar with because, among other things, his likeness appears on the $10 bill. Can anyone help me out? Thank you. Everybody hear that? Well, prior to coming here, Colonel Hamilton had made the acquaintance of a young lady whose name was Betsy Schuyler. She was the daughter of General Philip Schuyler, and she's in Morristown this winter visiting her aunt. Well, Hamilton manages to make daily visits to the aunt's house. He and Betsy have a successful courtship as they will marry the following year at her father's house in Albany. Officers also had more opportunities for socialization than did the enlisted men. We have on record where 34 officers, including George Washington, each contributed about $400 Continental dollars to host a series of 3 assemblies. We would call them dances. This money would have gone to pay the dance master and to rent the hall or tavern. Now this totals over 13,000 in Continentals. In silver, that would have been about $300. I'll give you one more example of what this inflation is like. If you wish to purchase a horse, it would have cost you 20,000 Continentals. Now, occasionally, there would be a visiting dignitary who came to pay his respects to Washington, and when that happened, it meant that one of the officers was going to have to give up his bed. If he had a buddy in the Home Guard, he could go there. If he knew someone in town, he could go there. But when all else failed, there was something like these cots at the end of the hallway. Now, Somebody said to me on a prior tour, "This is a huge room. What's the problem?" Well, it's just this. When Mrs. Washington came, she brought half a dozen servants. When the visiting dignitary came, he brought half a dozen servants. Some of Washington's people were here. So it wasn't like said officer had a whole lot of privacy in the quarters, but he was with his friends and colleagues. Out here, he's with a bunch of strangers, some of whom probably don't speak the language, so it couldn't have been a very comfortable situation for him. Do want to mention one of these visiting dignitaries, however, the Marquis de Lafayette. He came in May of 1780, and he brought the best news. France has decided to send men and money to aid the American cause. Now, there was a smaller officer's quarters. It just consists of 2 beds and a table. We're going to walk through there on the way to our next destination, but I want to point out to you what you're going to see. First bed is made up with a woolen canopy and a woolen bedspread for winter, and the far one is made up with linens for spring and summer. So as I said, we're going to walk through that room. You're going to go down 1 flight of stairs, and ahead of you will be the 2 rooms which comprise the servants' quarters. It's a bit of a tight squeeze, but after you. They have 2 rooms.
Were they
Downstairs.
Oh, they were.
Oh.
People during this time liked it because it's white and it's sanitary looking, you know.
It's a nice room.
I don't know anything stored in there. Good question.
That's winter and spring. I don't know if that would have been much cooler. I guess it would have.
Here we are in the servants' quarters. Note the low ceilings and doorways. This is a good thing because it conserved heat. Somewhat necessary, because if you look in these 2 rooms, you're not going to find any fireplaces. Why was that? At night, all fires were extinguished before the adults turned in for the evening. There was just too much chance of sparks flying and the whole place going up in flames. Well, in the daytime, the servants were down here. They were in the other part of the house. They were cooking, cleaning, doing laundry. So no fireplaces. Personally, I think it must have been brutal to wake up probably at the crack of dawn to start your day and to not even have the opportunity to light a fire while you're trying to get ready. Now, we believe that this space was meant for 4 to 6 servants, which is what we estimate that the Fords had. Washington's people were not down here. There were just too many of them. Now, you do see a couple of beds, but most servants would have slept on those ticked mattresses you see on the floor. Those are called pallets, and the beauty of those is that they can be rolled up and stored out of the way in the daytime. Not so important down here because there's no one here in the daytime. But for instance, that room we just came from, you can't picture Martha Washington tripping over a dozen mattresses on her way downstairs. So again, that was a good feature. Now, there is one thing you will not find down here nor any place in the house, and that is any indoor plumbing. Outside, there were privies or outhouses, and if one required the facility at night, you will find in each of these rooms a black chamber pot. We're going to continue our journey going down this next staircase, but before you go, I want you to be very careful here because this staircase is a bit unusual. The first 3 steps go off in a triangular configuration. and there's a little space, then there's the banister, and it becomes a regular staircase. We're going to meet at the tiny little room in the back left. So just be careful and see you downstairs.
Does this have access to
That's
just
an
the attic space?
That's an attic, yeah, that we jump get to visit.
It's like a decent space.
Oh, there's a lot of people packed in that. There would be a lot of those beds.
More sharing.
Have you seen?
This is the small room.
It's a pantry, like this is all the servants' quarter. The servants' wing.
What was that used for? What was that used for?
What's that?
Okay,
Rack?
this tiny little room in the back was Mrs. Ford's pantry.
Drying.
This is where her
It's for drying things out.
That's great. Where?
So that's an original chair right there.
Gabriel, 15, and Jacob Ford III, who is 8. We are going to walk through this room. I'm going to be back out in the hallway where we began, and I'm going to bring you up to date with what happened to the people in the house. But in the meantime, what you're going to see in this room is a double bed and a trundle. And again, on another tour, somebody said to me, wow, not a lot of room for 3 grown boys. That may be so, but again, remember how cold it is in this house at night. So I think having another body in proximity to yours would have been more than welcome. So let's walk through.
What's leather? Is it like leather?
Fire.
Fire?
But they usually put sand in so that the water wouldn't evaporate. So they would always be full of sand.
Building a rope bed.
Are you building one?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm tired of slipping that card.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
good.
definitely.
Sleep tight. Where it comes from.
I'm impressed. Did you see the Rose canteen there?
Yeah. And the fire buckets.
I'm building one of those still.
Oh, are you?
General's Canteen, yeah.
Nice, that'd be cool.
Right, drink it.
Cabins were for the helpers.
between 1880 and 1930, there was no administrative space until this building was built.
So that was just the caretakers for that.
Yeah,
okay.
that's
All
what
right.
I thought. Because it looked too small to do that.